The lonely widow who posted for a cook never expected to find a Comanche woman and her twins standing on her porch at dawn. Cordelia Whitmore gripped her rifle with trembling hands as three figures emerged from the morning mist like spirits born. From her desperate prayers, the woman stepped forward first. Dark hair braided with leather, calloused hands raised in peace. Two children flanked her like shadows, a girl fierce as winter wind and a boy quiet as still water. "You posted for a cook." The woman's voice carried the weight of careful English learned through necessity. "I am Ayanna Crowfeather. These are my twins." Cordelia's breath caught in her throat. The job notice she'd tacked to the general store board had been a gamble born of starvation and shame. She'd expected a grizzled cowhand down on his luck, not this. "Never this. I don't know what you heard, but I can't." The words tumbled out before courage could stop them. Ayanna's eyes held no surprise, only the patient exhaustion of a woman who'd heard rejection in a dozen different voices. The girl child stepped closer to her mother. The boy studied Cordelia's face like he was reading scripture. "We eat little, work much. You won't know we're here." The morning wind carried the scent of approaching winter. Cordelia's cattle had been dying one by one through the hard months. Her husband's grave marker stood crooked in the family plot, and the banknote in her kitchen drawer grew heavier each passing day. She lowered the rifle. 3 days. "That's all I can promise." Ayanna nodded once. The children gathered their meager bundles without celebration. They'd learned not to trust in permanence. The next hours passed in careful choreography. Ayanna moved to the neglected kitchen like she was mapping territory. The girl, Itzel, claimed the loft space with the watchfulness of someone who'd learned to guard every exit. The boy, Joaquin, touched the spines of Cordelia's few books with reverence usually reserved for holy things. Cordelia retreated to the porch. Her hands shook as she rolled tobacco she couldn't afford. The gamble felt larger now, more dangerous than simple bankruptcy. The smell of actual cooking drifted from her kitchen for the first time in months. Rabbit stew rich with herbs she didn't recognize. Cornbread that didn't crumble to dust. Her stomach cramped with sudden hunger. When the sun reached its peak, Ezekiel Donnelly's horse kicked up dust on the approach road. Cordelia's blood turned to winter water. Her neighbor had been sniffing around since her husband's death, like a vulture drawn to fresh carrion. "Cordelia," he tipped his hat with false courtesy. "Thought I'd check on you, neighborly concern and all." She stepped down from the porch to meet him in the yard. Distance from the house. Distance from the voices that might carry. "No need for concern, Ezekiel. I'm managing fine." His eyes swept the property, took in the repaired fence posts and the cleared water trough, work that hadn't been there yesterday. "Looks like someone's been helping. That's good. A woman alone shouldn't struggle so hard." The words carried weight she didn't want to examine. Donnelly had made his intentions clear in the months following the funeral. Marriage proposals dressed as business arrangements. Protection offered with strings attached. "I hired help. That so?" His smile revealed teeth stained with chewing tobacco. "Might want to be careful who you trust." Sheriff Fletcher mentioned increased patrols. Indians causing trouble down south. The words hit like cold stones. Cordelia kept her face steady as prairie stone. "I appreciate the warning." Donnelly studied her face for cracks in the facade, found none. Touched his hat brim again and wheeled his horse toward home. Cordelia waited until his dust cloud disappeared before returning to the house. Found Ayanna standing in the kitchen doorway. The woman had heard everything. "We can be gone by sundown." "No." The word surprised them both. "I said 3 days. I meant it." That evening they ate together in silence. The stew tasted like hope felt, warm and sustaining but fragile as spun glass. Itzel watched Cordelia with dark eyes that missed nothing. Joaquin asked quiet questions about the books on the shelf. When darkness fell, Cordelia lay awake listening to soft voices speaking in a language that flowed like water over stone. The twins talking to their mother in words she couldn't understand. Planning, perhaps. Or simply finding comfort in sounds. That felt like home. The next morning brought Sheriff Fletcher to her door. A good man weathered by years of keeping peace in a land that resisted such things. His visit felt different from Donnelly's, less predatory. More concerned. "Morning, Cordelia. Hope I'm not intruding." "Never, Amos. Coffee's fresh." They sat on the porch while morning light painted the scrub grass gold. Fletcher's badge caught the sun. "Heard you took on some help." Word traveled. Fast in small communities. Faster when it carried the promise of scandal. News travels. It does. He sipped the coffee Ayanna had brewed strong and black. "Just want you to know there's been talk. Military's got patrols out looking for renegades. Folks are jumpy. My help isn't causing trouble. Didn't say they were. Just saying be careful. People see what they expect to see. Sometimes that's dangerous for everyone involved." After Fletcher left, Cordelia found herself standing in the yard between her old life and whatever came next. The choice felt heavier now, more permanent than 3 days allowed. Ayanna emerged from the barn leading Cordelia's prize mare. The fee, animal that had refused handling since her husband's death, followed the woman like a devoted dog. "How did you do that?" She was in pain. Hoof abscess. Small thing made large by neglect. Cordelia watched Ayanna's hands work with gentle competence. Cleaning, treating, healing with knowledge that went beyond simple ranch work. "Where did you learn that?" "My grandmother, medicine woman." Before the world changed. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Too much truth, too soon. But the foundation had been laid. Evening brought the smell of rain on distant wind. Cordelia found herself hoping the storm would hold off. That morning would come gentle and allow this fragile arrangement to continue growing. 3 days had become something more. The 3 days became a week. The week became something neither woman dared name aloud. Ayanna moved through the failing ranch like wind through broken earth. She mended what others had given up for dead. The water pump that had stuttered silent for months sang again under her hands. Fence posts stood straight against the endless sky. Even the chickens began laying with renewed purpose. Cordelia watched from her kitchen window as the twins explored their temporary world. Itzel climbed the old oak with the fearlessness of someone who'd learned to find safety in high places. Joaquin sat beneath its shade, fingers tracing letters in the dust while he whispered the sounds to himself. The boy had discovered her small collection of books. 5 volumes salvaged from her father's house when the creditors came calling. He approached them like sacred objects, waiting for permission before touching the worn spines. "You can read them." Cordelia's voice startled them both. "If you want." His eyes widened. Hands already reaching before caution could stop him. The book fell open to a page of pressed wildflowers. His grandmother's Bible with its margins full of memories. "My mama taught me some letters, before." The word hung heavy between them. Before carried the weight of everything lost. "I could teach you more, if you're staying long enough." Joaquin looked toward his mother working in the vegetable garden. Ayanna's hands coaxed life from soil others had declared barren. Green shoots pushed through earth like hope through despair. "Mama says not to count on staying anywhere." The honesty cut deeper than complaints would have. Cordelia nodded. Understood the wisdom of keeping hearts guarded in a world that specialized in breaking them. That afternoon brought crisis wrapped in the form of a laboring cow. The animal had wandered far from the herd and lay gasping in the sparse shade of a mesquite grove. Her calf presented wrong. A death sentence in the making. Cordelia knelt in the dust beside the struggling creature. Her husband had been the one with healing hands. She'd watched him perform this miracle dozens of times, but watching and knowing were different countries entirely. "She's going to die." The words tasted like dust and failure. Ayana appeared beside her without sound, rolled up her sleeves, and pressed gentle hands against the cow's distended belly. Her touch carried certainty Cordelia had forgotten existed. Not today. What followed was surgery performed with the precision of a trained physician. Ayana's hands guided the calf into the world with movements that spoke of knowledge earned through years of practice. The cow rose on unsteady legs and began cleaning her newborn with devoted attention. Cordelia stared at the woman kneeling in the dirt, blood on her hands. Life restored through skill that went far beyond ranch work. Where did you really learn that? Ayana wiped her hands on grass already stained with afternoon shadow. My grandmother was curandera, healer. She taught me plants and bones and the places where life fights death. And the other learning? The way you cut? That wasn't folk medicine. The silence stretched between them like wire pulled taut. Truth balanced on the edge of trust. Army doctor, Fort Conco. He taught me to assist. Said I had the hands for it. Ayana's voice carried the weight of careful memory. Before his commander decided brown hands shouldn't touch white bodies. The confession settled in Cordelia's chest like stones in still water. She'd hired a cook and found a physician. A woman whose skills could save lives, but whose skin made those skills dangerous to claim. Why didn't you tell me? You posted for a cook. I needed work, simple trade. But nothing about their arrangement was simple anymore. Cordelia felt the shift in her bones like weather changing. This woman wasn't just help hired in desperation. She was something rarer. Someone who could make the broken whole again. That evening, Ezekiel Donnelly returned. His smile held more teeth than friendliness. Cordelia. Hope I'm not interrupting supper. She met him in the yard again. Away from windows, away from watching eyes. Always welcome, Ezekiel. What can I do for you? Then thinking about our conversation. About you managing the loan. His gaze swept the property with the hunger of a man cataloging assets. Places looking better. Your help must be working out. Well enough. Good to hear. Just want you to know I've been keeping an eye out. Making sure you're safe. The words carried weight she didn't want to examine. Notice some unusual tracks near your property line. Unshod horses. The kind the Army's been asking about. Fear settled in her stomach like cold iron. I haven't seen anything unusual. Course. Not. You've got enough to worry about without adding Indian troubles. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. Just remember, a woman in your position needs protection. Real protection. The kind that comes with permanent arrangements. After he left, Cordelia sat on her porch until the stars emerged. Ayana found her there when the children had been settled for sleep. He knows. Suspects. Ayana's voice held the calm of someone who'd lived with danger so long it had become another weather pattern. Knowing and proving are different things. What happens when he decides to prove it? We make sure he can't. The next morning brought Sheriff Fletcher again. This time his visit carried the weight of official business. Cordelia. Sorry to bother you so early. Coffee's always ready for you, Amos. They sat in familiar silence while morning painted. The scrub grass gold. Fletcher's badge caught the light, but his eyes held shadow. Got word from the Army. Captain's coming through. Thorne. He's asking questions about missing persons. Fletcher's cup rattled against its saucer. Looking for a woman and 2 children. Claims they're stolen captives. The words hit like stones thrown at glass. Cordelia kept her hands steady through pure will. What kind of questions? The kind that make honest folks nervous. The kind that turn neighbors into bounty hunters. Fletcher met her eyes. Whatever help you've got, make sure they know to stay close. Stay quiet. This captain's got a reputation for seeing what he wants to see. After Fletcher left, Cordelia found Ayana in the kitchen, grinding corn for the day's bread. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, but her shoulders carried new tension. "You heard." "I heard." Ayana's voice remained steady, but her knuckles showed white against the grinding stone. "Thorn found our trail. Who is he?" The question opened wounds that hadn't finished healing. Ayana set down her work and stared through the window at her children playing in the morning sun. "The man who killed my husband, the man who claims my children are his to take." The truth fell between them like a bridge finally built. Cordelia understood now why Ayana's eyes held such careful watchfulness, why the twins communicated in glances and whispers. They weren't just seeking work. They were running for their lives. "How long do we have?" "Not long." Ayana resumed. Her grinding. "He's close, following old trails, old pain." Cordelia watched Joaquin teaching Itzal the letters he'd learned. Two children who'd found moments of peace in her failing ranch, who'd begun to trust in the possibility of staying somewhere long enough to call it home. "There has to be something we can do." Ayana's hands stilled on the grinding stone. "There is. We can run again." "No." The word surprised them both with its strength. "Not yet. Not until we have to." That afternoon, Cordelia began making preparations she hoped she'd never need. Loading her husband's rifle, counting ammunition, planning routes through terrain she'd known since childhood. The fragile alliance had become something worth defending. The question was whether two women of hair of children could stand against the kind of authority that wore uniforms and claimed righteousness. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The air tasted of rain and change. Time was running out. The storm broke on a Tuesday morning when Ezekiel Donnelly rode into town with news that would change everything. Cordelia was teaching Joaquin his letters when the boy's head snapped up. His eyes found the window, found the dust cloud, approaching too fast for casual visits. "Mama," the word carried warning sharp as winter. "Wind." Ayana emerged from the kitchen, took one look at her son's face, and understood. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Knife into her boot, medicine bag slung across her shoulder. The preparations of someone who'd learned to pack a life into moments. The root cellar. "No." Cordelia's voice surprised them all. "No more hiding." The dust cloud resolved into Donnelly's familiar figure. But his smile had changed, grown teeth, grown hunger. He dismounted with the confidence of a man holding winning cards. "Morning, Cordelia. Beautiful day for revelations." She met him in the yard, the same dance they'd performed before. But the music had turned darker. "What can I do for you, Ezekiel?" "Funny thing happened in town yesterday." His eyes swept the property with new ownership. "Saw your help at the mercantile. Buying supplies, looking comfortable." The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading outward toward disaster. And I got to thinking about that army captain, the one asking questions about missing persons." Donnelly's smile revealed too many teeth. "Turns out there's a reward, substantial sum, for information leading to the capture of stolen captives." The earth seemed to shift beneath Cordelia's feet, the careful balance they'd maintained crumbling like drought-baked clay. "I don't know what you're suggesting." "Course you don't. Sweet woman like you wouldn't harbor fugitives, wouldn't risk everything for strangers." He stepped closer. "Whiskey breath and unwashed clothes. But accidents happen. Good people get fooled by sob stories and pretty faces." Cordelia's hand found the rifle leaning against the porch post. Not quite a threat, not quite surrender. "What do you want, Ezekiel?" "Simple transaction. You sign over the deed to this place. I handle the army captain. Everyone walks away clean." His eyes glittered with avarice barely contained. "Well, most everyone." The offer hung between them like poison dressed as mercy. Cordelia felt the weight of watching eyes. Ayana at the kitchen window, the twins somewhere close. A family that had learned to trust her with their lives. I need time to think. Course you do, Sunset. That's generous time for such a simple decision. Donnelly mounted his horse with theatrical flourish. After that, I ride to town. Have a conversation with Captain Thorne. Let him know where to find his stolen property. The dust from his departure settled like grave dirt on everything it touched. Cordelia found Ayanna packing their few belongings with mechanical precision. The twins sat on their bedroll, ready to flee again, ready to become ghosts in the wind. You don't have to run. Yes, we do. Ayanna's hands never stopped moving, folding, rolling, erasing evidence of their brief home. This was always temporary. We knew it would end. It doesn't have to. The words stopped Ayanna's hands. She looked at Cordelia with eyes that had seen too many endings to trust in new beginnings. What are you saying? I'm saying we fight. The idea settled between them like seed in fertile ground. Dangerous, fragile, necessary. You don't understand what you're risking. Thorne doesn't just want us captured. He wants us destroyed. Cordelia sat on the bed beside Itzel. The girl's fierce eyes held questions too adult for her young face. Tell me about him. The story came in pieces. Fragments of memory sharp enough to cut. Captain Mordecai Thorne. A man who wore authority, like armor, and wielded regulation like a weapon. Who'd arrived at the peaceful settlement where Ayanna lived with her husband and children, claiming to investigate reports of white captives. There were no captives. Just families trying to survive. Mixed families, Mexican, Comanche, people who didn't fit the territories the army wanted to draw. Ayanna's voice carried the weight of witness, of survival purchased with blood and guilt. Thorne wanted information, wanted compliance. When the people refused to invent crimes that didn't exist, he decided to create his own justice. The massacre had been swift, efficient, justified in reports that painted peaceful families as savage raiders. Ayanna's husband died defending their home. She and the children escaped only because Joaquin had been fishing at the creek when the shooting started. Thorne claimed we were captives he'd liberated. Said our children had been stolen from white families. Created papers to prove whatever lie served his purpose. Cordelia understood now. The careful watchfulness. The ready bags. The way the twins communicated in glances and whispers. They weren't just running from capture. They were running from a man who'd already stolen their world once. Why does he want you specifically? The question opened the deepest wound. Ayanna's hands stilled on her packing. Her shoulders carried the weight of shame that belonged to someone else, because I said no. The words fell like stones into deep water. Cordelia waited for the ripples to settle. He offered protection. Said he could make sure my children were placed with good Christian families, instead of being sent to reservation schools. All I had to do was express proper gratitude. Understanding hit like a physical blow. The captain's pursuit wasn't about justice or duty. It was about a man's wounded pride. About power challenged and revenge deferred. When I refused, he had my husband shot for resisting arrest. Claimed I'd been forced to say no. That I'd thank him later for the rescue. The twins had gone silent. This was family history they'd learned to carry without speaking. Trauma that shaped every day but couldn't be voiced. We've been running for 8 months. He follows when he can. Loses the trail when terrain favors us, but he never stops. Cordelia rose from the bed, walked to the window, stared out at the land her husband had died to claim, at the garden Ayanna had coaxed back to life, at the future she'd begun to imagine. There's something you need to know about me too. She retrieved the letter from her kitchen drawer. Bank correspondence written in the careful script of civilized. Foreclosure. The ranch would be seized in 2 weeks. Her husband's dreams sold to cover debts she couldn't pay. I'm broke. Have been for months. The job posting wasn't generosity. It was desperation. Ayanna took the letter. Read it with the careful attention of someone who'd learned to parse official documents for hidden threats. Why didn't you tell? Me? Same reason you didn't tell me about Thorn. Some truths are too dangerous to share with strangers. They looked at each other across the kitchen table. Two women who'd built trust on foundations of necessary lies. Who'd found family in the space between truth and survival. We're not strangers anymore. No, we're not. The afternoon brought Sheriff Fletcher to their door. But this time his visit carried different weight. He dismounted slowly, removed his hat with the deliberation of a man choosing his words carefully. Cordelia, Ayanna, he nodded to each woman. Mind if we talk? They sat on the porch while shadows lengthened. Toward evening, Fletcher's badge caught the dying light, but his eyes held something that looked like hope. I know who you really are, he addressed Ayanna directly. Know who's hunting you, know why. The words should have brought fear. Instead they brought something unexpected, relief. The exhaustion of carrying secrets finally lifted. Captain, Thorn's been asking questions around town, making promises about rewards and justice. But some of us have been asking questions too. Fletcher reached into his shirt pocket, withdrew a folded paper worn soft with handling. Got this from a friend. At Fort Conco. Seems our captain's been conducting unauthorized operations, using Army resources for personal business, making enemies of his fellow officers. The document was an official inquiry, questions about missing supplies, unexplained patrol routes, reports that didn't match evidence. The kind of investigation that could end careers and open criminal proceedings. What does this mean? Means Thorn's got problems bigger than finding you. Means he's been operating outside his authority for months. Means we might be able to turn hunter into hunted. Cordelia felt something shift in her chest. Hope, perhaps. Or the first taste of a plan that might actually work. What do you need from us? Fletcher smiled. The first genuine expression she'd seen from him in weeks. I need you to trust me. And I need you to be ready to fight back. The sun touched the horizon. Somewhere in town, Ezekiel Donnelly was preparing to collect his blood money. Captain Thorn was sharpening his authority for one final strike. But in the failing light of the kitchen, three adults bent over maps and documents, planning their own version of justice. The running was over. Dawn broke with the sound of approaching horses. Too many horses moving too fast for anything but trouble. Cordelia stood at her kitchen window watching dust clouds converge on her property from two directions. Captain Thorn's blue uniforms from the north. Ezekiel Donnelly's civilian clothes from the east. The trap closing with military precision. Ayanna appeared beside her, silent as morning mist. Her hands steady despite the storm approaching. You sure about this? No. Cordelia's voice carried the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. But running won't solve anything, not for any of us. The twins sat at the kitchen table, Joaquin clutching his book, Itzel watching the approaching riders with eyes that had seen too much violence for her young years. They'd learned to be still when danger came calling, to become small and forgettable until the storm passed. But this time would be different. Sheriff Fletcher emerged from the barn where he'd spent the night. His badge caught the morning light. His rifle hung casual in his hands, but his eyes held the alertness of a man ready for war. Time to see if this plan of ours holds water. Thorn arrived first. A man built from rigid angles and barely contained fury. His uniform pressed to perfection. His authority worn like armor against a world that dared question his righteousness. He dismounted with theatrical precision. 6 soldiers flanked him in formation that spoke of violence held in check by the thinnest margin of military discipline. Sheriff Fletcher, Mrs. Whitmore. His voice carried the clipped authority of a man accustomed to obedience. I believe you have something that belongs to the United States Army. Fletcher stepped forward, badge visible. Authority equal to authority. Captain Thorne. Didn't expect you so early. Justice keeps no schedule, Sheriff. I'm here to collect stolen property and arrest those who've aided in concealing federal crimes. The words fell like stones into still water, but Fletcher's expression never changed. If anything, his smile grew wider. Funny you should mention federal crimes, Captain. Been doing some reading myself. Fascinating correspondence from your commanding officer. Fletcher produced the folded documents from his shirt pocket. Official papers that carried the weight of military justice. Thorne's eyes flicked to the familiar letterhead and his jaw tightened. I don't know what lies you've been told, but my authority here is absolute. Is it? Fletcher's voice remained conversational, but his rifle shifted. Position. Because according to Colonel Harrison's investigation, you've been conducting unauthorized operations for months, using Army resources for personal vendettas, falsifying reports to cover your tracks. The morning air grew thick with unspoken threats. Thorne's soldiers exchanged glances. Military men who'd learned to recognize the difference between legal orders and personal revenge. Those documents are classified. How did you obtain them? Same way you obtained those wanted posters claiming Mrs. Crowfeather's children are stolen captives. Through channels that don't much care about proper procedure when justice is at stake. Ezekiel Donnelly chose that moment to arrive. His horse, lathered with sweat, his eyes bright with greed and whiskey courage. He dismounted with the swagger of a man expecting reward for services rendered. Captain Thorne, told you I'd deliver. They're all here. The woman and her half-breed spawn plus the widow who's been harboring them. The crude words hung in the air like smoke from a dirty fire. Even Thorne's soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Some lines remained unspoken among men who claimed civilization. Mr. Donnelly. Fletcher's voice carried disapproval sharp as winter wind. You might want to reconsider your choice of words. And your choice of allies. But Donnelly was too drunk on anticipated wealth to read the changing weather. Don't see why we need all this jaw-flapping. Captain wants the Indians. I want the ranch, simple transaction between reasonable men. The words fell into silence that stretched like wire pulled taut. Then Cordelia stepped onto her porch. Ayanna beside her. The twins flanking their mother with the quiet dignity of people who'd learned to face injustice with their heads high. You want to take my children? Ayanna's voice carried across the yard with the force of contained lightning. Then you'll need to explain to these good people why you killed their father. Thorne's face flushed red above his pristine collar. Those children are documented captives. You are a hostile who kidnapped them from their rightful families. What families? Fletcher's question cut through the morning air. Check the missing persons reports, Captain. No children matching their descriptions reported stolen. No families claiming them as their own. The trap was springing shut. Thorne could see it in the faces around him. His own soldiers beginning to understand they'd been used as instruments of personal vengeance rather than military justice. Furthermore, Fletcher continued, producing another document. Got testimony from survivors of your attack on that settlement 8 months ago. Turns out there were witnesses. People who saw you shoot an unarmed man whose only crime was protecting his family. The words hit Thorne like physical blows. His hand moved toward his sidearm, but stopped when he realized 6 rifles were trained. On him, his own soldiers had made their choice. This is mutiny. No, sir. The sergeant spoke for the first time. A grizzled man with scars that spoke of real battles fought for real causes. This is justice. Donnelly tried to retreat to his horse, but found his path blocked by townspeople who'd been drawn by the commotion. The doctor who'd treated patients saved by Ayanna's skill. The pastor whose wife's difficult birth had been eased by gentle hands. The shopkeeper who'd found the twins polite and eager to learn. Now hold on. Donnelly's voice cracked with panic. I was just trying to help. Doing my civic duty. Your civic duty? Dr. Peterson stepped forward, a man whose authority came from healing rather than harming. Your civic duty was conspiring to destroy the woman who saved more lives in this county than the rest of us combined. The crowd murmured agreement. People who'd been prepared to fear based on rumors found themselves defending based on experience. Thorne made one final desperate play. These people are harboring a federal fugitive. Anyone who aids them will face military justice. What fugitive? Pastor Williams moved to stand beside Ayanna. The woman who delivered my grandson when the midwife couldn't be found. The healer who asks no payment for her services. More voices joined the chorus. Stories of lives saved and suffering eased. The community that had been prepared to judge found itself choosing to protect instead. Fletcher produced one final document. The most important of all. Captain Thorne, by order of Colonel Harrison, you are relieved of command pending investigation into unauthorized operations, falsification of reports, and conduct on becoming an officer. The paper fluttered in the morning breeze. Official seal and signature clear for all to see. Thorne's authority stripped away with bureaucratic efficiency. Sergeant Martinez will escort you back to Fort Conco, where you'll await court-martial. The sergeant nodded, gestured to his men. They moved to flank their former commander with the resigned efficiency of soldiers following legitimate orders. Donnelly tried once more to salvage his schemes. What about my deal? What about the ranch? Cordelia stepped forward. Her voice carried across the yard with newfound strength. The ranch isn't yours to claim, Ezekiel. Never was. Never will be. The crowd began to disperse. Drama concluded. Justice served with the satisfaction of a community that had chosen correctly when tested. 6 months later, the ranch thrived under autumn sun. Cattle grazed in pastures restored to health. The vegetable garden provided abundance for 3 families now instead of one struggling widow. Ayanna's medical practice operated from the converted barn. Patients arrived daily seeking treatment from hands that healed without judgment. The twins attended school in town where Joaquin's quick mind impressed teachers, and Itzel's protective instincts made her a natural leader. Cordelia stood on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The foreclosure notice had been replaced by a partnership agreement. The ranch saved through cooperation rather than charity. Ayanna emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on a clean cloth. Another patient treated. Another life improved through knowledge shared freely. Good day? They're all good days now. The twins raced toward the house. Joaquin clutching a book of poetry borrowed from the teacher. Itzel carrying wildflowers, gathered from the meadow behind the school. They'd found home in the space between cultures. Safety in a community that had learned to value healing over hatred. Family in the bonds forged through shared struggle and mutual respect. The evening star appeared in the darkening sky. First light in the gathering darkness. Promise of another dawn to come. The lonely widow who'd posted for a cook had found something far more valuable. She'd found the family she'd never known she needed. In a Comanche healer and her twins who'd transformed her failing ranch into a place where hope grew stronger than fear. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.